Hey, what's going on, everybody? This video is on the nitrogen cycle. This nitrogen cycle has a little bit more going on than the other cycles. The carbon cycle, water cycle, a little bit more complex, but nothing too crazy. It's still pretty straightforward. The big thing is when you take a deep breath, about 78% of the gas that you're breathing in is nitrogen. So there's a ton of nitrogen stored in our atmosphere. And that's really the main source of our nitrogen in our atmosphere. However, strange thing about this nitrogen in our atmosphere is we really can't do anything with it. But we know we need it, right? So nitrogen is essential. Why do we need nitrogen? Because it's a key component in DNA, RNA, proteins, right? Amino acids. Without nitrogen, you wouldn't be able to build those biological molecules. We breathe in a ton of nitrogen every time you take a breath. About 78% of the air that goes in your lungs is nitrogen, but you can't do anything with it. We can't metabolize N2, nitrogen gas. So how do we get our nitrogen? It's kind of a weird situation. And the answer is these little bacteria called nitrogen-fixing bacteria play a major role in the nitrogen cycle. So let's talk about them. Here's our nitrogen cycle, right? So the key players here are these bacteria that can convert nitrogen gas into ammonia. Once we get into ammonia, plants can absorb ammonia. Ammonia can be changed into a couple other nitrogen compounds as well, right? But basically the nitrogen, once it's changed out of nitrogen gas from once these bacteria do their job and get it into some converted nitrogen compounds such as ammonia, it can be absorbed by those producers. So therefore, how do we get it? The food chain, right? We eat producers, we eat primary consumers, we get nitrogen from being passed down from the food chain. There are some situations where that some nitrogen fixation, so some nitrogen can get changed from gaseous state N2 into other nitrogen compounds, which is known as atmospheric nitrogen fixation, which is done by lightning. So it can actually happen in our atmosphere. But the real bulk of this is done by these special bacteria, these bacteria that convert nitrogen gas into usable nitrogen compounds. Again, humans add nitrogen to the biosphere through fertilizers all the time, right? When you fertilize your lawn, right, they're looking for certain nutrients to kind of, feed your grass to grow better. And those nutrients really are comprised of phosphorus and nitrogen. So it's a key fertilizer. So we put some nitrogen into the soil as well. Okay. So again, on these bacteria, and these are the key parts, the key components of the nitrogen cycle are these, what they're known as nitrogen fixing bacteria. And they really have a symbiotic relationship with a certain class of plants called legumes. Legumes are like soybeans and other bean plants and peanut plants. They're just plants that in their roots, in the nodules on their roots, you have these highly concentrated colonies of these nitrogen fixing bacteria. And what these bacteria do, they really drive this whole nitrogen cycle. Without it, the world wouldn't be as we know it today. In fact, organisms would have a problem existing because they wouldn't have their nitrogen. These bacteria live there and they convert the nitrogen gas into ammonia. And they do that in exchange for carbon and protection from that plant as well. So these bacteria are a huge part of this nitrogen cycle, these nitrogen fixing bacteria. So here's our nitrogen cycle, right? The first step of this is nitrogen fixation. With that, only certain bacteria living in the roots of legumes can use nitrogen gas directly. Nitrogen fixing bacteria, they're the key players here, right? They convert that nitrogen into other nitrogen compounds, specifically ammonia. And once we convert it into ammonia, it then can kind of be absorbed by plants, or other bacteria can change that ammonia into other nitrogen compounds. So those bacteria are known as nitrifying bacteria. And they can take the ammonia compounds, NH3, and convert it into nitrates and nitrites, NO2s and NO3s. And they can be absorbed by plants as well, again, getting into the food chain and being passed down. This is a cycle. So at some point, we need to return the nitrogen back to the atmosphere. It's not just as easy as decomposition, because if we're being decomposed, we don't really hold nitrogen gas in us, right? We hold, nitrogen compounds. So there's also this other type of bacteria known as denitrifying bacteria, which undergo the process of denitrification, and they can convert the nitrates back into nitrogen gas, kind of completing this cycle. So with this, there's really three major types of bacteria in this process. There's nitrogen-fixing bacteria, nitrifying bacteria, and denitrifying bacteria, the three kind of main processes here, as well as assimilation, which I'll highlight in a second. So we're looking back here at the nitrogen cycle, right? Here's our nitrogen gas. You breathe it in, you breathe it out, can't really do anything with it, right? Here's our nitrogen-fixing bacteria, changing that nitrogen gas into ammonia that can be used directly by decomposers or plants. And here's our ammonia right here. Also, we can have these other bacteria, these nitrifying bacteria can convert these ammonia compounds into nitrites or nitrates, right? And really it's the nitrates that get absorbed by plants, or we say if it's being taken in, it's being assimilated into the plant tissue. So we call it absorption by plants. We call it assimilation. Once it's there, it's in the food chain. That's how we get our nitrogen, right, from eating. And then to kind of complete this cycle, right, organisms die, decomposition takes place, and then denitrifying bacteria can convert those nitrates, nitrogen compounds, back into nitrogen gas to kind of complete the cycle. And that's it. That is the nitrogen cycle. Thanks for listening.